We all remember it, right? June 2023, the whole world was glued to the news about the Titan submersible. It had vanished on its way down to the Titanic, and we all watched that frantic search, just hoping for a miracle. Well, the official U.S. Coast Guard report is finally out, and the truth it reveals, it's so much more disturbing than just a simple accident. So let's dive into what the investigators found and uncover what really led to this completely avoidable tragedy.
Okay, so let's just quickly go back to that day. On June 18th, the Titan starts its dive. But less than 2 hours in, at 9:45 a.m., everything goes silent. Communication is just gone. The time it was supposed to come back up to the surface comes and goes. And then, after 4 agonizing days of searching, they find the debris field. The absolute worst was confirmed. That catastrophic implosion of the sub's carbon fiber hull. It killed all 5 people on board instantly. But here's the thing, the investigation would later make crystal clear. That horrifying moment wasn't some random freak accident. No, it was the inevitable end of a long and very troubling series of decisions.
So to figure out how this could possibly happen, the U.S. Coast Guard launched this massive investigation. And what they found, well, it paints a really damning picture. It's not just about a technical failure. They call it intentional negligence.
And the result of all that work is this staggering 335-page report. And as you read it, page after page, it just meticulously builds the case that this was no accident at all. And right at the core of the whole thing is this central, damning conclusion from the investigation's chairman himself. He says, the loss of these 5 lives was easily preventable. Just that one sentence, it changes everything. It reframes the whole event from a tragic accident to a story of deliberate, catastrophic failure. So, what was the fatal flaw? Well, it all boils down to one really unprecedented design choice: the hull. It was made of carbon fiber, a material that had never, ever been used for a crewed deep-sea submersible before. You see, under the crushing, insane pressure of the deep ocean, carbon fiber is really prone to something called delamination. Just imagine the layers of the material peeling apart like an onion. Experts in the field had been screaming that this material was totally wrong for these depths, but OceanGate, they just ignored them.
And the warnings weren't just coming from outside experts. Get this, on previous dives in 2021 and 2022, the crew actually recorded cracking sounds coming from the hull itself. The vessel was literally screaming for help, but it seems like nobody with the power to stop the missions was listening. This quote from a former OceanGate consultant is just, it's absolutely chilling. He said it was mathematically certain the hull would fail. Let that sink in for a second. This wasn't a risk, or a maybe, or a possibility. It was a certainty. The only question was when. But look, this technical flaw didn't exist in a vacuum, right? The investigation uncovered this really toxic company culture where raising a safety concern wasn't just frowned upon, it was actively punished.
And this quote from OceanGate's CEO, Stockton Rush, who, remember, was also piloting the Titan on its final dive, this really says everything you need to know about the company's mindset. He saw established safety protocols, the very rules designed to stop tragedies like this, as just an obstacle to his vision of innovation. And this wasn't just a philosophy, it was company policy. Back in 2018, the company's own director of operations was fired right after he presented a critical safety report. And the reason he was given? The CEO told him his conservative approach was against my vision. So the message to every other employee was crystal clear: stay quiet or you're out.
This comparison just lays it all out there, showing how far OceanGate was from the industry norms. I mean, standard practice is certified steel or titanium, materials we know can handle that pressure. OceanGate, they chose experimental carbon fiber. Instead of real-time voice comms for instant contact, they used a delayed text message system. And yeah, the sub was famously controlled with a modified video game controller.
This pattern of cutting corners wasn't just about some ideology, it was totally systemic. The investigation peeled back all these layers and revealed a company that was just fundamentally broken, from the money all the way down to its day-to-day operations. You know, maybe nothing captures the level of sheer amateurism better than this one little detail from the report. In the operations manual, for a dive 2.5 miles below the surface, critical sections were just left blank. They were marked with the phrase, "to be determined." It's almost hard to believe.
The report really details a complete systemic collapse. The company was in such a bad financial crisis that the CEO was funding it personally and asking staff to work for free.
To save money, super complex engineering work was just handed off to inexperienced junior staff. And that operations manual, it had only 4 pages dedicated to the deep-sea mission. It's really no wonder a former director said the entire operation felt like a high school project.
So what's the final lesson here? What do we take away from all this? Well, the report concludes that the Titan disaster wasn't just a failure of parts or manuals. It was a profound failure of leadership, of accountability, and of basic human judgment, all of it driven by just unchecked hubris. And this final quote from the CEO, it says it all. At some point, safety is pure waste. This was the core belief that doomed the Titan. It's a mindset that sees risk not as something to be carefully managed, but as an acceptable price to pay for a thrill-seeking venture, a venture that tragically ended in a field of debris at the bottom of the ocean.
The Coast Guard report lays out the facts with devastating clarity. It shows how a flawed vision, a culture of silence, and financial desperation all came together to create a tragedy that was, in the report's own words, easily preventable. And that really leaves all of us with a critical question. If we don't learn from this, where will the next Titan emerge? And who will be the next innovator who decides that safety is just a waste?